I pulled into my driveway after 3 exhausting days at a work conference in Chicago, looking forward to Max's excited barking and tail wagging that always greeted me home. But silence filled the air as I stepped out of my rental car. No golden blur racing around the corner of the house, no joyful whimpering from behind the front door. Something felt wrong immediately. I fumbled with my keys, calling out Max's name as I entered the house. My mother Carol sat calmly at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. When I asked where Max was, she looked up with casual indifference and said the words that shattered my world completely. "We sold him," Carol said, not even bothering to look up from her newspaper. "Danny's girls needed new phones for school, so we got $800 for that dog. You'll be fine, Leonard. It's just a dog." I stood frozen in the doorway, my work bag sliding off my shoulder and hitting the floor with a thud. 8 years. Max had been my companion for 8 years, through my college graduation, my first job, my breakup with Jessica, and every lonely night when anxiety kept me awake. He wasn't just a dog to me, he was family. "You sold my dog?" The words came out as a whisper. I couldn't process what I was hearing. "Danny said you're never home anyway," Carol continued, turning a page. "Those girls deserved something nice for once. Emma and Sophie have been using those old flip phones forever." My brother Danny walked into the kitchen then, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. At 35, he still lived in our childhood bedroom upstairs, unemployed for the past 8 months, and completely dependent on our parents. His twin daughters, both 14, lived with their mother most of the time but stayed here every other weekend. "Hey, little brother," Danny said, grabbing a beer from the refrigerator. "Don't look so tragic. Max is probably happier with kids who actually have time to play with him." "Where is he?" My voice was getting louder now. "Who did you sell him to?" "Some nice family from across town," Carol answered. "The Hendersons. They have children who'll appreciate him properly." I pulled out my phone immediately, my hands shaking as I searched for Henderson in the local directory. There were 12 Hendersons listed. I started calling each number, my heart pounding with each dial tone. "Hi, this is Leonard Martinez. I'm looking for the family who recently bought a golden retriever named Max. My family sold him by mistake while I was away." The first 3 calls led nowhere. The 4th Henderson hung up on me. By the 6th call, I was desperate. "Leonard, stop being so dramatic," Carol said, watching me pace around the kitchen. "We told them you couldn't take care of him anymore because of work. They're not going to give him back now." "You told them what?" The phone slipped from my hand, clattering on the tile floor. Danny laughed, taking a long swig of his beer. "We had to give them a reason, man. Can't just say we needed quick cash for phones." "Made it sound like you were being responsible, giving up a pet you couldn't handle." "But that's not true," I shouted. "Max is everything to me. I've never missed a feeding, never skipped a walk, never left him alone for more than 8 hours." "Calm down," my father Frank said, appearing in the doorway. He looked uncomfortable, avoiding my eyes. "What's done is done, son." "Dad, please tell me you didn't go along with this." Frank's silence was answer enough. He'd been the one to physically hand Max over to strangers. My own father had betrayed me just as completely as the rest of them. I spent the next hour calling every Henderson in the phone book, becoming more frantic with each dead end. Finally, I found them. Mrs. Henderson answered on the 3rd ring. "Oh yes, we bought Max yesterday," she said cheerfully. "Such a sweet dog." The family explained that his owner couldn't care for him anymore due to work commitments. "We're so happy to give him a good home." "Ma'am, I'm Leonard, Max's actual owner. My family sold him without my permission while I was away on business. I need him back." There was a long pause. "I'm sorry, but we paid good money for this dog. Our children are already attached. We can't just give him away. I'll pay you back exactly what you paid, plus extra for your trouble." "I'm afraid that's not possible. We consider Max part of our family now." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, feeling completely helpless for the first time in my adult life. That evening, Danny showed up for dinner with his daughters Emma and Sophie, both clutching brand new iPhone 14s in sparkly cases. They barely looked up from their screens as they walked past me, completely absorbed in setting up their social media accounts. "See how happy they are?" Danny said, ruffling Emma's hair. "This worked out perfectly for everyone." "Everyone except Max," I said quietly. "Dogs adapt," Carol said, setting plates around the table. "He'll be fine with his new family." But I knew Max better than anyone. He was a sensitive dog who'd never lived anywhere but this house. He slept in my room every night, knew my schedule perfectly, and waited by the window every evening for me to come home from work. The thought of him confused and scared in a strange house with strange people made my chest feel tight. I excused myself from dinner and sat in my old bedroom, holding Max's favorite squeaky ball that I'd found abandoned under my bed. The house felt empty without the sound of his claws clicking on the hardwood floors, without his warm presence at my feet while I worked on my laptop. My family had not just sold my dog. They had sold my best friend, my emotional support, and 8 years of unconditional love for $800 worth of phones that Emma and Sophie would probably break or lose within 6 months. As I fell asleep that night, I made a decision. I was going to find Max and bring him home, no matter what it took. I called in sick to work the next morning, something I'd never done unless I was genuinely ill. My manager David was understanding when I explained I had a family emergency, though I couldn't bring myself to admit that my family had sold my dog while I was representing our company at a conference. I started at the Henderson house on Maple Street, a modest 2-story home with a small front yard and a wooden fence around the back. I rang the doorbell 3 times, but no one answered. Their driveway was empty, suggesting the whole family was out. I walked around to the fence and peered through a gap in the boards, hoping to catch a glimpse of Max. But the backyard was empty except for some old patio furniture and a rusty barbecue grill. Feeling like a stalker, I drove to the end of the block and parked where I could see their house. I waited for 2 hours until a blue Honda Civic pulled into their driveway. A woman in her 40s got out, followed by 2 kids who looked about 10 and 12 years old. No sign of Max. I approached Mrs. Henderson as she was unloading groceries from her trunk. "Excuse me, Mrs. Henderson? I'm Leonard Martinez. We spoke yesterday about Max." She looked up, recognition dawning on her face, followed immediately by annoyance. "I told you yesterday. We're keeping the dog. Please don't show up at our house again." "I just need to see him," I said. "To know he's okay. He's been my companion for 8 years." "He's fine," she said curtly, grabbing 2 grocery bags and heading toward her front door. "He's adjusting well to his new home. Can I just see him for 5 minutes?" I brought some of his favorite treats. Mrs. Henderson stopped and turned around, her expression softening slightly. "Look, I understand this is hard for you, but we paid for this dog fairly. Your family was very clear that you couldn't take care of him anymore. We're giving him a good home with children who love animals, but I never agreed to sell him. I was away on a work trip. They had no right to make that decision." "That sounds like a family matter you need to work out with them," she said. "Max belongs to us now." She disappeared into the house, leaving me standing alone in her driveway. I felt completely powerless. In the eyes of the law, Max was property, and my family had every legal right to sell him since he lived in their house, and they'd been helping with his food and vet bills over the years. I drove home feeling defeated, but my family's reaction made everything worse. Danny was sprawled on the living room couch, laughing at something on television while his daughters sat nearby, still glued to their new phones. "How's the great dog hunt going?" he asked sarcastically when he saw me. "This isn't funny, Danny. Max is suffering." "Oh, please," Carol said from the kitchen. "He's probably already forgotten about you. Dogs live in the moment." "That's not true, and you know it," I said. "Max knows my voice, my smell, my routine. He's probably wondering why I abandoned him." "You're being dramatic," Carol repeated, her favorite phrase whenever I showed any emotion. "It's just a dog, Leonard. You can get another one." "I don't want another one. I want Max." Emma looked up from her phone for the first time all day. "Mom says you're being weird about a dog," she said to me. "Why don't you just buy a puppy or something?" I stared at my 14-year-old niece, realizing she had no concept of the bond between a person and their pet. To her, Max was as replaceable as last year's iPhone model. I spent the rest of the day driving around the Hendersons' neighborhood, hoping to spot Max on a walk or playing in someone's yard. I posted on every local Facebook group and community forum I could find, sharing Max's picture and explaining the situation. The responses were overwhelmingly supportive, with dozens of people offering to help search or keep their eyes open. But I also faced criticism from people who thought I was being unreasonable. "The new family paid for the dog legally," one person commented. "You can't just demand him back because you changed your mind." I tried explaining that I never consented to the sale, but without proof of that conversation, it was my word against my family's. That evening, I went to Peterson's pet store, the largest pet supply shop in our area, hoping the Hendersons might shop there. The manager, a kind woman named Patricia, remembered them immediately. "Oh yes, the family with the golden retriever," she said. "They were in here yesterday buying supplies. Seemed like nice people." "What kind of supplies did they buy?" I asked. Patricia looked thoughtful. "Basic stuff. A collar, some food, a few toys." The kids seemed excited about having a dog. "Did they ask any questions about care or training?" "Not really. They seemed to know what they were doing." I thanked Patricia and left, feeling slightly relieved that the Hendersons were at least buying supplies for Max. But I couldn't shake the image of him sleeping in a strange house, wondering where I'd gone. My girlfriend Sarah called that evening as I sat in my car outside the Henderson house again, hoping for any glimpse of Max. "Leonard, you need to accept that this situation is out of your control," she said after I explained what had happened. "I know you love Max, but you're becoming obsessed. Wouldn't you be obsessed if someone sold your cat while you were away? That's different. Whiskers lives in my apartment. Max lived in your parents' house." "But he's my dog," I said. "I pay for his food, his vet bills, his grooming. I take care of him every day. Then maybe you should have gotten your own place where your family couldn't make decisions about him." Sarah's words stung because they contained some truth. At 28, I was still living in my childhood home, saving money for a down payment on a house while helping my parents with their mortgage. I'd planned to move out within the next year, taking Max with me. Now it felt like that plan had died along with everything else. When I got home that night, I found Max's favorite rope toy in the garage trash can. Carol had thrown it away like it was garbage, like 8 years of memories meant nothing. I pulled it out, brushing off coffee grounds and potato peels, and held it against my chest. Frank appeared in the garage doorway, looking more uncomfortable than I'd ever seen him. "Son, I need to tell you something," he said quietly. "Your mother and Danny, they've been planning this for weeks." "What do you mean?" "They have a group text chat without you. They've been discussing selling Max since last month, waiting for you to go out of town so they could do it without confrontation." The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't a spontaneous decision made while I was away. This was a calculated plan to get rid of the most important thing in my life. "Why didn't you stop them?" Frank looked down at his feet. "Your mother can be very persuasive when she wants something. And Danny's been struggling financially since he lost his job. The girls needed phones for school. So you sacrificed my happiness for Danny's convenience? I thought you'd understand eventually. You're the responsible one, Leonard. You always land on your feet." "This time I won't," I said. "Not without Max." That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't just going to find Max. I was going to bring him home, no matter what it took. 3 days of searching finally paid off when I spotted Mrs. Henderson's blue Honda Civic in the parking lot of Oakwood Heights Elementary School. I waited until school let out, then followed them at a safe distance as they drove home. This time, when they pulled into their driveway, I heard something that made my heart race: barking. I parked across the street and watched as the Henderson kids ran into their house without a backward glance. But I could see movement in the backyard now, a golden shape pacing behind the wooden fence. I waited until the family went inside, then approached their back fence from the alley behind their house. Through a gap in the boards, I saw him. Max was there, but he looked wrong. His normally glossy golden coat was dull and matted. He'd lost weight. His usual energetic demeanor had been replaced by listless pacing around a small doghouse. "Max," I whispered through the fence. His head snapped up immediately. He knew my voice. He rushed to the fence, whimpering and pawing at the boards that separated us. I stuck my fingers through the gap, and he licked them frantically, his whole body trembling with excitement and confusion. "I'm going to get you out of here, buddy," I promised. "I'm so sorry this happened." Max was chained to the doghouse with about 10 feet of slack, enough to move around a small area but not enough to explore the yard or find proper shelter. There was a metal food bowl near the doghouse, but it was empty except for some stagnant water with leaves floating in it. I took pictures with my phone, documenting the conditions. Max looked malnourished and stressed, nothing like the healthy, happy dog I'd left just 5 days ago. I waited until evening, then knocked on the Hendersons' front door. Mr. Henderson answered this time, a large man in his 50s with graying hair and suspicious eyes. "You're the guy who keeps bothering my wife about our dog," he said before I could introduce myself. "Sir, I just saw Max in your backyard, and I'm concerned about his condition. He's lost weight and appears to be chained up constantly." "That dog is fine," Mr. Henderson said firmly. "He's getting used to his new home. I'd like to offer you double what you paid for him. $1,600. Cash." Mr. Henderson's expression hardened. "He's not for sale. We bought him fair and square, and our kids are attached to him now. Your kids don't seem to be spending any time with him. He's been alone in the yard every time I've driven by. Are you stalking our house?" Mr. Henderson stepped closer, his voice rising. "Because if you don't stop harassing my family, I'm calling the police. I just want my dog back. He's not adapting well to this situation." "Your dog? According to your family, you couldn't take care of him anymore. We're doing you a favor by giving him a good home." "That's not true. My family lied to you. I never agreed to sell Max." Mr. Henderson laughed harshly. "Sounds like you need to work out your family problems somewhere else. Stay away from our property." He slammed the door in my face, leaving me standing on his porch feeling more helpless than ever. I drove home in a rage, ready to confront my family about the lies they'd told the Hendersons. But when I walked into the house, I found Danny and his daughters in the living room, the girls showing off their new phones to Carol and Frank like they'd won the lottery. "Look, Grandma," Emma said, holding up her phone. "I can take videos and put filters on them and share them with all my friends." "That's wonderful, sweetheart," Carol said, beaming at her granddaughter. "Uncle Leonard," Sophie called out when she saw me, "look at my new phone. Dad got it for us with money from selling that old dog." The casual way she said it, like Max was just some object they'd cleaned out of the garage, made my vision blur with anger. "That old dog was my best friend," I said quietly. "Don't be so dramatic," Danny said, not looking up from his own phone. "Dogs are replaceable. Family is forever." "You're not acting like family," I shot back. "We are family," Carol said. "And family looks out for each other. Those girls needed phones more than you needed that dog. Max isn't just a want, Mom. He's my emotional support animal. He helps me deal with anxiety and depression. You know this." Frank looked up from the television. "Maybe it's time you learned to deal with those things on your own, son. You're almost 30 years old." The lack of empathy in his voice was devastating. These people who claimed to love me had no understanding of what they'd taken away. To them, Max was just an inconvenience that had been converted into something useful. That night, I called my cousin Jake, the only family member who'd ever understood me. Jake lived 2 hours away, and had always been the rebel of the family, the one who called out Frank and Carol when they were being unreasonable. "They did what?" Jake said when I explained the situation. "That's insane, Leonard. Even for them, that's insane." "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "The Hendersons won't sell him back, and my family thinks I'm being dramatic." "You're not being dramatic. If someone sold my dog while I was away, I'd lose my mind. Want me to drive down there and talk some sense into them?" "I don't think talking is going to work anymore." Jake was quiet for a moment. "What's the dog's condition like? Is he being treated well?" I described what I'd seen in the backyard, and Jake's tone became serious. "That sounds like neglect, cousin. If you can document that they're not providing proper care, you might have grounds to get him back." "How?" "Animal control, for starters. And if they're planning to resell him, that might be considered animal trafficking depending on how they acquired him." For the first time in days, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe there was a way to save Max that didn't involve begging or pleading with people who'd already made up their minds. I spent the rest of the night researching animal welfare laws in our state, learning about documentation requirements and complaint procedures. If the Hendersons weren't going to return Max willingly, I'd find another way to bring him home. But first, I needed to know exactly what was happening to him in that backyard. I spent the next morning parked across the street from the Henderson house, documenting everything I observed. The family left together at 7:45, presumably dropping the kids at school and going to work. Max barked frantically as they drove away, straining against his chain as their car disappeared down the street. For the next 8 hours, Max remained alone in the backyard, with no human contact. I watched him pace in circles around his doghouse, periodically barking at passers-by, clearly distressed by his abandonment. No one came to check on him, refill his water, or let him inside. When the family returned at 4:30 in the afternoon, the kids ran straight into the house without acknowledging Max's excited barking. Mrs. Henderson went inside as well. Mr. Henderson spent about 2 minutes in the backyard, dumping some dry kibble into Max's bowl and spraying fresh water from a garden hose into his water dish. Then he too went inside, leaving Max alone again. This pattern continued for 3 days. Max was treated like an outdoor decoration that required minimal maintenance. No walks, no playtime, no interaction beyond brief feeding visits. It was heartbreaking to watch. I started talking to neighbors on the Henderson street, introducing myself as a concerned citizen who'd noticed a dog that seemed to be left alone constantly. Mrs. Peterson, who lived next door, was eager to talk. "That poor animal barks all day long," she said. "Starts at 7 in the morning when they leave, and doesn't stop until they come home. I've been thinking about calling someone." "How long has this been going on?" "They got the dog about a week ago. At first I thought it was just adjustment period, you know? New place, new family, but it's getting worse, not better." Another neighbor, Mr. Collins from across the street, had similar observations. "The dog looks thin to me," he said. "And I've never seen those kids play with him. They just ignore him completely." I documented these conversations, building a case that Max was being neglected, but what really broke my heart was learning from Mrs. Peterson that Max howled every night around 10 o'clock, the exact time I used to take him for his evening walk. "It's the saddest sound," she said, "like he's calling for someone who's not coming." That evening I confronted my family again, armed with photos and witness statements about Max's condition. "Look at these pictures," I said, showing them my phone. "He's lost at least 10 pounds. He's chained up constantly with no interaction." Carol glanced at the photos dismissively. "He looks fine to me. Dogs are supposed to live outside. Not Max. He's been an indoor dog his whole life. He sleeps in my room every night." "Well, maybe it's good for him to learn some independence," Danny said, not looking away from the television. "He's not learning independence. He's suffering from neglect and separation anxiety." "You're being ridiculous," Carol said. "Stop trying to make us feel guilty for doing what was best for everyone." "Best for everyone except Max," I said, "and except me." Frank finally spoke up. "Leonard, you need to accept that this situation is permanent. The dog belongs to someone else now." "The dog has a name," I said angrily. "His name is Max, and he's been part of this family for 8 years. "He's been your pet for 8 years, Carol corrected. "There's a difference." That's when I realized the fundamental disconnect. To my family, Max was just an animal that happened to live in our house. To me, he was a family member with feelings, memories, and emotional needs. We were never going to see this situation the same way. My girlfriend Sarah called while I was sitting in my car outside the Henderson house that evening. "Leonard, I'm worried about you," she said. "You've been obsessing over this dog for a week now. It's not healthy." "How is wanting to rescue my best friend unhealthy?" "Because you're not eating properly, you're not sleeping, and you've missed 3 days of work. That dog is not worth destroying your life over." "That dog saved my life," I said quietly. "When I was going through depression after college, Max was the only reason I got out of bed some days." "But you're not depressed anymore. You have a good job, a relationship, goals for the future. You don't need a dog to define your happiness. It's not about need," I tried to explain. "It's about love and loyalty and commitment. Sometimes love means letting go," Sarah said. "And sometimes love means fighting for what matters, even when everyone else thinks you're crazy." There was a long pause. "Maybe we should take a break," Sarah said finally, "until you work through whatever this is." "Whatever this is? You mean grief? You mean betrayal by people I trusted? I mean obsession. You're choosing a dog over your relationships with real people." After she hung up, I sat in my car feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. My family had betrayed me, my girlfriend had abandoned me, and Max was suffering because of decisions I had no power to reverse. But as I watched Max pace in his small circle behind the fence, I made a decision. I didn't care if everyone thought I was obsessed or unreasonable or dramatic. Max had never given up on me during my darkest moments. I wasn't going to give up on him now. I called Jake and asked him to drive down for the weekend. It was time to stop playing by everyone else's rules. Jake arrived Friday evening with a determination that matched my own. At 32, he was 4 years older than me, and had always been the family member willing to challenge our parents when they were wrong. He took one look at the photos I'd taken of Max and shook his head in disgust. "This is animal abuse, pure and simple," he said. "I can't believe Frank and Carol thought this was acceptable." "They think I'm overreacting," I said. "You're underreacting, if you ask me. If someone did this to my dog, I'd have gotten him back by now, one way or another." Saturday morning, we drove to the Henderson house together. Jake wanted to see the situation firsthand before we made any decisions about next steps. We parked across the street and watched as the family left for what appeared to be a shopping trip. "There," I said, pointing to the backyard where Max was visible through the fence gaps. "You can see how thin he's gotten." Jake pulled out a pair of binoculars he'd brought and studied the backyard carefully. After several minutes, he handed them to me with a grim expression. "Leonard, that dog is in worse shape than your photos showed. Look at his ribs. You can see them clearly from here." I adjusted the binoculars and felt my stomach drop. Max looked skeletal compared to his normal healthy weight. His golden coat was matted and dirty, and he moved with less energy than I'd ever seen. "We need to document this properly," Jake said, pulling out a video camera. "If we're going to report them for animal neglect, we need clear evidence." We spent the next hour recording Max's condition and behavior from multiple angles. The evidence was damning. Max appeared malnourished, stressed, and completely isolated from human contact. "The question is," Jake said as we reviewed the footage, "do we go through official channels or take direct action?" "What do you mean by direct action?" "I mean we get your dog back today, right now, while they're out." "That would be stealing." "No, that would be rescue. There's a difference." Jake had always been more decisive than me, more willing to bend rules when the situation demanded it. But I'd never considered simply taking Max back. What if they call the police? Let them. We have documentation of neglect. Any reasonable person would understand why we acted. I thought about it for several minutes, weighing the risks against the certainty that Max was suffering more with each passing day. "How would we even do it?" I asked. "Simple. We wait for them to leave again. Then we ask one of the neighbors for help, offer to pay them to let us into the yard to get your dog back." It sounded crazy, but as I watched Max through the fence, listlessly lying by his empty food bowl, crazy started to seem reasonable. The Hendersons returned from their shopping trip around noon, and we decided to come back later when they went out for dinner. In the meantime, Jake and I visited 3 different neighbors on their street, explaining that I was Max's original owner and showing them evidence of the dog's declining condition. Mrs. Peterson was immediately sympathetic. "I was wondering when someone would do something about that poor animal," she said. "Those people don't deserve to have a dog." Mr. Collins was more cautious, but agreed that Max appeared to be suffering. "If you can prove he belonged to you originally, I don't see why you shouldn't take him back," he said. The third neighbor we spoke with, a teenager named Tyler, who lived 2 houses down from the Hendersons, was the most helpful. "I've been watching that whole situation," Tyler said. "My mom's been saying we should call animal control. Those people never walk that dog or play with him or anything. Would you be willing to help us get him back?" Jake asked. Tyler looked interested. "What did you have in mind?" Jake explained our plan, and Tyler agreed to help for $200. His parents were out of town for the weekend, leaving him home alone, so he could act without having to explain himself to adults. The Hendersons usually go out for dinner on Saturday nights around 6, Tyler said. They're always gone for at least 2 hours. We waited. At exactly 6:15, the Hendersons' car pulled out of their driveway and disappeared down the street. Jake, Tyler, and I walked quickly to the backyard gate. "Max," I called softly through the fence. His reaction was immediate and heartbreaking. He started whimpering and pawing at the fence, recognizing my voice and becoming increasingly agitated with excitement. Tyler unlocked the gate from his side yard, which connected to the Hendersons' backyard through a gap in the fence line. The moment I stepped into that yard, Max went absolutely wild with joy. He jumped on me, licked my face, and made sounds I'd never heard him make before. A combination of whimpering, barking, and what could only be described as crying. "Hey, buddy," I said, kneeling down and hugging him close. "I'm so sorry this happened to you." Up close, his condition was even worse than it had appeared from a distance. He'd lost at least 15 pounds. His collar was too loose, and his coat felt rough and dry. But worse than his physical condition was his emotional state. He was trembling uncontrollably, desperate for attention and affection. Jake was documenting everything with his camera while I unclipped Max's chain and attached his old leash that I'd brought from home. "We need to move fast," Jake said. "Tyler, can you lock that gate again after we leave?" "No problem," Tyler said. But then his expression changed. Guys, we have a problem." I looked up to see headlights turning into the Hendersons' driveway. They were home early. "Go, go, go," Jake whispered urgently, but it was too late. Mr. Henderson was already getting out of his car, and he could see us in his backyard through the kitchen window. "Hey!" he shouted, running toward the back door. "What are you doing in my yard?" I picked up Max, who was still trembling with excitement, and headed for Tyler's yard. But Mr. Henderson was faster than I expected. He caught up with us just as we reached the gate. "Put that dog down right now," he demanded. "You're stealing my property." "I'm rescuing my dog from neglect," I said, not stopping. "Tyler, you're in big trouble," Mr. Henderson said to the teenager. "I'm calling your parents and the police." "Go ahead," Tyler said defiantly. "My parents will want to see the videos of how you've been treating this dog." Mrs. Henderson and the kids had come outside now, drawn by the commotion. "Mom, what's happening?" the younger child asked. "This man is trying to steal our dog," Mrs. Henderson said. "This man is trying to save his dog from abuse," Jake corrected, stepping between me and Mr. Henderson. I kept walking toward my car with Max in my arms, but I could hear the argument escalating behind me. By the time I reached the street, both families were shouting, and neighbors were starting to come outside to see what was happening. Jake caught up with me just as I was putting Max into my car. "Drive," he said. "I'll deal with this." But I couldn't leave Jake to face the consequences alone, and I realized that running away would only make us look guilty. "No," I said. "We're going to finish this right here, right now." I turned to face the Hendersons, still holding Max protectively in my arms. "You want to call the police?" I said. "Let's call them. Let's also call animal control and the local news. Let's have everyone see how you've been treating this dog." Mr. Henderson's confident expression faltered slightly. "We've been treating him fine." "Really? When was the last time you walked him? When was the last time your children played with him? When was the last time he was inside your house?" Mrs. Henderson looked uncomfortable. "Dogs are supposed to live outside." "Not this dog," I said. "This dog has slept in a climate-controlled bedroom every night for 8 years. This dog has never been chained up or left alone for more than a few hours at a time." More neighbors were gathering now, drawn by the commotion. Mrs. Peterson spoke up first. "I can confirm that dog has been barking constantly since they got him," she said. "And he looks much thinner than when they first brought him home." Mr. Collins nodded in agreement. "I was planning to call animal control myself. The poor thing seems miserable." The tide was turning in our favor, but I knew the real test was coming when the authorities arrived. Mr. Henderson did call the police, just as my own family arrived on the scene. Danny must have been tracking my location through social media, because he showed up with Carol and Frank just as the patrol car pulled into the street. "What is going on here?" Carol demanded, marching over to where I stood with Max still in my arms. "Leonard stole our dog." Mrs. Henderson said immediately. Leonard rescued his dog from neglect, Jake countered. Officer Williams, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, looked around at the gathered crowd and sighed. Okay, everyone take a step back. Let's sort this out calmly. She asked each party to explain their side of the story. The Hendersons claimed I had stolen their legally purchased pet. I explained that my family had sold Max without my consent while I was away on business, and that the Hendersons had been neglecting him. Do you have any proof of ownership? Officer Williams asked me. I pulled out my phone and showed her photos of Max from the past 8 years, veterinary records in my name, and receipts for his food and supplies. And you have proof of purchase? She asked the Hendersons. Mr. Henderson looked uncomfortable. We paid cash. We don't have a receipt. Who did you buy the dog from? His family, Mrs. Henderson said, pointing to Carol and Frank. Officer Williams turned to my parents. Did you sell this dog to the Henderson family? We did, Carol said firmly. Leonard was unable to care for him properly due to work commitments. Is that true, sir? Officer Williams asked me. Absolutely not. I was away for 3 days at a mandatory work conference. I never agreed to sell Max, and I've been his primary caregiver for his entire life. He lives in our house, Frank said. We had every right to sell him. Officer Williams looked thoughtful. This seems like a family dispute rather than a theft issue. However, I'm concerned about the animal welfare allegations. Would you mind if I examine the dog's living conditions? The Hendersons reluctantly agreed, and we all walked to their backyard. Officer Williams took one look at the chain, the empty food bowl, and the small doghouse, then spent several minutes examining Max himself. This dog is significantly underweight, she said finally, and these living conditions are not adequate for a dog of this size and breed. We've only had him for a week, Mr. Henderson protested. He was thin when we got him. Actually, he wasn't, I said, showing Officer Williams photos of Max from the week before I left for my conference. The difference was shocking when viewed side by side. Officer Williams called for an animal control officer, and within 30 minutes, Lisa Chen arrived with a full examination kit. She spent 20 minutes checking Max's condition, taking photos and documenting everything she found. This animal shows clear signs of neglect, Lisa said finally. Malnutrition, dehydration, stress behaviors, and inadequate shelter. I'm issuing a citation for animal neglect and recommending immediate removal of the animal from this property. Mrs. Henderson burst into tears. We tried our best. We've never had a dog before. Why did you buy a dog if you didn't know how to care for one? Jake asked. Your son's family said he was easy to take care of, Mr. Henderson said, pointing at me. They said he mostly took care of himself. I turned to stare at my family in disbelief. You told them Max takes care of himself? Carol looked defensive. We told them he was a good dog who didn't require much maintenance. He requires daily walks, regular feeding, fresh water, social interaction, and indoor shelter, I said. He's a living being, not a lawn ornament. We didn't know, Mrs. Henderson said weakly. Officer Williams made the final decision. Given the evidence of neglect and the dispute over ownership, I'm releasing the animal to Mr. Martinez pending resolution of the ownership question. The Hendersons have 24 hours to provide proof of legal purchase, or ownership will revert to Mr. Martinez by default. As we prepared to leave, a car pulled up that made my stomach drop. Sarah got out, looking furious. Leonard, I heard from your mother that you were getting arrested for stealing a dog. What is wrong with you? I'm not getting arrested, I said quietly. I'm getting my dog back. This obsession has gone too far. Look at yourself. You're holding up traffic, disturbing the peace, and alienating your entire family over a pet. Over my best friend, I corrected. Sarah looked around at the crowd of neighbors, police officers, and family members, all gathered because of what she clearly saw as my unreasonable behavior. I can't do this anymore, she said. When you decide to start acting like an adult instead of a crazy person, call me. She drove away, leaving me standing in the street with Max in my arms, feeling like I'd lost everything except the one thing that mattered most. But then Tyler, the teenager who'd helped us, spoke up. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing, he said. That dog was miserable here. Mrs. Peterson nodded in agreement. Sometimes you have to fight for what you love, even when other people don't understand. Even Officer Williams offered a small smile as she got back into her patrol car. "Take good care of him," she said. As the crowd dispersed, I realized I was facing a choice. I could try to repair my relationships with my family and Sarah by compromising on Max, or I could accept that standing up for what I believed in might cost me those relationships. Looking down at Max, who was finally calm and content in my arms for the first time in over a week, the choice was obvious. Some things were worth fighting for, no matter the cost. The next 24 hours changed everything. By Sunday morning, the Henderson family had decided not to pursue ownership of Max. According to Officer Williams, they realized they weren't equipped to care for a dog properly and didn't want to face potential criminal charges for animal neglect. But the real vindication came when Tyler's mother returned from her weekend trip and learned what had happened. Mrs. Anderson was a journalist for our local newspaper, and she was outraged by the story. "This is exactly the kind of irresponsible pet ownership that leads to animal suffering," she told me when she called Sunday evening. "Would you be willing to go on record about what happened?" The story ran on the front page of the Tuesday newspaper with the headline, "Family Sells Man's Beloved Dog While He's Away on Business." Mrs. Anderson had interviewed neighbors, animal control officers, and even gotten a quote from the veterinarian who examined Max after I brought him home. The article painted a clear picture of neglect and family betrayal that resonated with readers across our community. By Wednesday morning, the newspaper's website had received over 500 comments, almost all of them supporting me and condemning both the Hendersons and my family's actions. The story was picked up by regional news stations, and by Thursday, I was getting interview requests from pet advocacy groups and animal welfare organizations. The story had touched a nerve with pet owners who couldn't imagine their families betraying them in such a fundamental way. But the real justice came in the form of consequences for everyone involved. The Hendersons faced formal animal cruelty charges filed by the district attorney's office after Lisa Chen's report documented clear evidence of neglect. They were banned from owning pets for 5 years and required to pay fines and court costs totaling over $3,000. My family faced a different kind of justice. Social consequences that hit them where it hurt most. Danny's ex-wife Jennifer called him after reading the newspaper article. "I can't believe you sold Leonard's dog to buy phones for the girls," she said during a conversation I overheard when he put her on speakerphone. "What kind of example does that set for Emma and Sophie?" "It's not that big a deal," Danny protested. "It is a big deal. You taught them that it's okay to sell someone else's beloved pet for money. How would you feel if someone sold your car while you were out of town? That's different." "No, it's not. Emma and Sophie are going to return those phones, and you're going to figure out another way to buy them what they need." Jennifer hung up, leaving Danny staring at his phone in disbelief. Carol faced even worse consequences at her job. She worked as a receptionist at a veterinary clinic, and when her co-workers learned about what she'd done, the backlash was immediate and severe. "How could you work around animals every day and still think it was acceptable to sell your son's dog without his permission?" her supervisor, Dr. Martinez, asked during a meeting I learned about later from Frank. "I didn't think it was that serious," Carol said. "You didn't think it was serious to betray your son's trust and cause an animal to suffer neglect. Perhaps you should consider whether you're suited for a career in animal care." Carol was ultimately forced to take unpaid leave while the clinic decided whether her actions were compatible with their values and mission. Frank faced consequences in his social circles. He belonged to a men's bowling league where several members were dog owners, and when the story spread through their community, his teammates were not sympathetic. "How do you look at yourself in the mirror after doing something like that to your own son?" his bowling partner Pete asked him, according to Frank's own guilty confession to me later. But the most meaningful justice came from an unexpected source: Danny's daughters themselves. Emma and Sophie had been following the story online, reading comments from hundreds of people who were horrified by what their father and grandmother had done. They began to understand that they had been complicit in causing serious harm to both me and Max. On Friday evening, exactly 1 week after I'd brought Max home, Emma and Sophie showed up at our house with their new phones in hand. "Uncle Leonard," Emma said, her eyes red from crying, "we want to give these back. We didn't know that's what happened to Max, Sophie added. Mom explained it to us, and we feel terrible. Dad told us you couldn't take care of Max anymore because of work, Emma continued. He never said he was selling your best friend to buy us phones. I sat down with my nieces on the front porch, Max lying contentedly at my feet after his evening walk. I understand you didn't know the whole truth, I told them. But I want you to learn something important from this situation. What? Sophie asked. When someone you love has something that's precious to them, you protect it. You don't sell it or give it away or treat it like it's disposable. Love means protecting what matters to the people you care about. Emma nodded solemnly. We're going to tell Dad we don't want the phones anymore. And we're going to get jobs to buy our own phones, Sophie added. So this never happens again. They left the phones on my porch and walked home, leaving Danny to explain to Carol why his daughters were suddenly refusing the gifts that had cost Max his happiness. Frank was the first family member to offer a genuine apology. He found me in the backyard on Saturday morning, watching Max chase squirrels for the first time since his ordeal began. Son, I owe you an apology that's bigger than anything I can put into words, he said. I looked up at my father, this man I'd respected my entire life, and saw something I'd never seen before. Genuine shame. I failed you as a father, Frank continued. I let your mother and brother convince me that selling Max was reasonable, and I didn't stand up for what I knew was right. Why didn't you stop them? Because it was easier to go along with them than to deal with the conflict. But that's not an excuse. You trusted me to protect what mattered to you while you were away, and I betrayed that trust. Frank sat down next to me on the porch steps, watching Max play in the yard he'd missed so desperately. How can I make this right? He asked. You can't, I said honestly. Max suffered for a week because of decisions you made. I felt completely alone and betrayed by my own family. Some things can't be undone, but can they be forgiven? I thought about that question for a long time. Frank had made a terrible choice, but unlike Carol and Danny, he seemed to genuinely understand the magnitude of what had happened. Maybe, I said finally. But things can't go back to the way they were. Frank nodded. I understand. I just hope you'll give me a chance to prove that I've learned from this mistake. Carol took longer to come around. For 2 weeks after the newspaper story ran, she maintained that everyone was overreacting and that she'd done nothing wrong. But the social isolation she faced eventually wore her down. Her friends stopped inviting her to lunch. Her coworkers treated her coldly. Neighbors who had known her for years crossed the street to avoid talking to her. The community had decided that her actions were unforgivable, and she was experiencing the consequences of that judgment. Finally, on a rainy Tuesday evening, she knocked on my bedroom door where I was working on my laptop with Max sleeping at my feet. Leonard, can we talk? I looked up at this woman, who had raised me, who had taught me to walk and talk and read, and felt a complicated mixture of love and disappointment. What did you want to say? Carol sat down in my desk chair, looking older and more tired than I'd ever seen her. I wanted to say that I'm sorry, she said quietly. Not because everyone is mad at me, but because I hurt you in a way I never intended to hurt you. But you knew it would hurt me, I pointed out. That's why you did it while I was away, instead of talking to me about it first. You're right. I knew you'd say no, so I decided it was easier to ask for forgiveness than permission. Except you never asked for forgiveness. You told me I was being dramatic, and that I should get over it. Carol was quiet for a long moment, watching Max sleep peacefully on his dog bed. I think I convinced myself that you'd adjust, she said finally, that you'd realize it wasn't as important as I thought it was. But it was important. Max isn't just a pet to me, Mom. He's family. I understand that now. Watching how miserable you've been, seeing how happy he is to be home, reading all those comments from people who think I'm a monster, I understand now that I was wrong about everything. It was the first real apology she'd offered, and I could see the sincerity in her eyes. I don't know how to fix this, she continued. I don't know how to undo the damage I've done to our relationship. You start by accepting that Max is non-negotiable, I said. He's part of my life permanently, and anyone who wants a relationship with me needs to accept that. I accept that, Carol said immediately. I accept all of it. Danny was the last holdout, maintaining until the very end that he'd done nothing wrong. But when his daughters refused to speak to him for 3 days, and when his ex-wife threatened to limit his visitation rights if he didn't make amends, he finally appeared at my door. "I still think everyone overreacted," he said by way of opening, "but I'm sorry it turned out the way it did. It wasn't a real apology, but it was as close as Danny was capable of giving. I accepted it for what it was and moved on." The most unexpected consequence of the whole ordeal was a call I received from Dr. Martinez at Carol's veterinary clinic. "Mr. Martinez, I've been following your story in the news," she said. "I wanted to reach out because we're looking for someone with your passion for animal welfare to join our team." "What do you mean?" "We're creating a new position focused on community education and animal advocacy. After seeing how you fought for Max, I think you'd be perfect for the role." The job offer was unexpected, but felt like a sign that something positive could come from all the pain and conflict. I accepted the position and found my calling in helping other people navigate animal welfare issues and protect their beloved pets. 6 months later, I moved into my own apartment with Max, finally achieving the independence I'd been working toward. The ordeal had taught me that some relationships aren't worth preserving if they require you to compromise your core values. Sarah never called back, and I eventually realized that someone who couldn't understand my bond with Max wasn't someone I wanted to build a future with anyway. Jake became my closest family relationship, the one person who had stood by me when it mattered most. Frank and I rebuilt our relationship slowly, with new boundaries and a deeper understanding of what trust really meant. Carol worked hard to regain my respect, supporting my new career and even volunteering at animal shelters to better understand the world she'd dismissed for so long. Danny and I maintained minimal contact, enough to preserve family unity but not enough to risk further conflict. Emma and Sophie grew into thoughtful young women who learned early that actions have consequences and that protecting what others love is a fundamental part of caring about them. And Max? Max recovered completely from his ordeal, regaining his healthy weight and happy demeanor. He became something of a local celebrity after the news story, and I often brought him to community events as an example of the importance of responsible pet ownership. Every evening, as we walked through our neighborhood, I was reminded of how close I came to losing him forever. But I was also reminded of something more important. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is fight for what you love, even when everyone else thinks you're wrong. The bond between a person and their dog isn't something that can be reduced to dollars and cents or explained to people who've never experienced it. But it's real, and it's powerful, and it's worth defending. Max taught me that loyalty isn't just something you receive, it's something you give. And sometimes, giving loyalty means standing alone against everyone else in your life to protect what matters most. That's a lesson I'll carry with me forever, along with the knowledge that Max and I can face anything together, because we've already survived the worst thing I could imagine, being separated against our will. Now, sitting here in our own home, watching Max sleep peacefully in his favorite spot by the window, I know we'll never be apart again, and that makes everything we went through worth it. I'd love to hear from you about your own experiences. Have you ever had to fight for something you loved when everyone else thought you were wrong? How far would you go to protect your beloved pet? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like this video if Max's story touched your heart. Subscribe for more stories about the unbreakable bonds between people and their animal companions. And share this video with anyone who understands that sometimes love means fighting battles that others can't comprehend. Thank you for listening to our story. And may you never have to face a choice between the people you love and the animals who love you unconditionally.